The subcommittee will come to order. After recognizing myself and my friend, Ranking Member Ted Deutsch, for 5 minutes each for our opening statements, I will then recognize other members seeking recognition for 1 minute each. We will then hear from our witnesses without objection. The witnesses' prepared statements will be made a part of the record. Members may have 5 days to insert statements and questions for the record, subject to the length limitation in the rules. The chair now recognizes herself for 5 minutes. 2 years ago this month, this subcommittee held a hearing on security challenges and U.S. interest in Lebanon with an administration panel represented by state's NEA Bureau and DOD's Middle East Policy Bureau. I opened that hearing by stating that Lebanon is a country that is seemingly perpetually in a state of conflict or on the verge of breaking out into a conflict at any moment. The same can be said about the country's political stability. Lebanon is a country that is seemingly perpetually in a state of political crisis or on the verge of breaking out in a political crisis at any moment. We're now 2 years deeper into the political deadlock that has gripped Beirut. The presidency has remained unfilled for nearly 2 years, while long overdue legislative elections have been pushed even further back to 2017 at the very earliest. The more things change, the more they stay the same in Lebanon. 2 years ago, Lebanon was struggling to cope with the economic strain of hosting over 1 million Syrian refugees who have fled to their neighbor, seeking refuge from the fighting between Assad, Hezbollah, ISIS, and other terror entities. These refugees would be the equivalent of roughly 1/4 of the Lebanese population. Estimates suggest that over 3.3 million people in Lebanon are now in need of assistance. As has been the case throughout the region in response to the Syrian humanitarian crisis, the U.S. has stepped up and to date has provided over $1.1 billion in humanitarian assistance for Lebanon to help it cope with the strain of its refugee influx. However, as has also been the case throughout the region in response to the Syrian humanitarian crisis, appeals for assistance to Lebanon have gone drastically underfunded, and many of our partners and allies have failed to step up as needed. The American people are generous. They understand there is a real need to support some of these nations struggling to cope with this large influx of refugees, but their generosity and understanding is not unlimited. The administration must do more to press other responsible nations to increase their contributions so that we don't bear the full brunt of the cost. 2 years ago, Lebanon's stability was a great concern for the United States. Hezbollah was fighting alongside Assad in Syria, and the Syrian conflict threatened to spill over into Lebanon. Again, the more things change, the more they stay the same for Lebanon's security and stability. However, now Lebanon has taken on an even greater strategic importance for the United States and for the entire region. This small country, trapped in a political stalemate for nearly 2 years now, has an increased significance and is one of the battlegrounds in the proxy battle between Saudi Arabia and Iran. In the absence of any consensus on a way forward in the political deadlock, Hezbollah, aided and abetted by the Iranian regime, has moved to fill the leadership vacuum and increase its presence and influence in Lebanon. In the aftermath of the weak and dangerous Iranian nuclear deal, and even during the negotiations, Iran has increased its support to Hezbollah. Indeed, key to Iran's strategic objectives in supporting Assad in Syria was maintaining the supply route from Damascus to Lebanon, which they have successfully managed, and reports even suggest that they may have accelerated the transfer of weapons, including strategic weapon systems, to Hezbollah through Syria. More troubling still, it is apparent that Hezbollah has managed to gain sufficient influence in Lebanon to hinder its relationship with its Arab neighbors. In fact, in February of this year, the Lebanese justice minister resigned, explicitly citing Hezbollah's undue influence and the harm it was causing to Lebanon's relationships. That same month, Saudi Arabia led the Gulf Cooperation Council nations to designate Hezbollah as a terrorist organization, with the Arab League shortly following suit. The Saudis, taking aim at Hezbollah and Iran again, also announced they were halting $3 billion in military assistance to Lebanon. No doubt the Saudis recognize that it is not just in the political sphere that Iran and Hezbollah have gained undue influence. Hezbollah has increased its presence within and partnership with the Lebanese armed forces. This synergy between the Lebanese armed forces and Hezbollah should really call into question, then, the administration's continued support for the LAF and the president's budget request that doubles the foreign military financing assistance we provide to Lebanon. It is also worrisome that the commander of the Lebanese armed forces is now currently in Moscow and will meet with Russian military officials to discuss coordination on anti-terror operations. A senior Russian official was quoted as saying that Moscow and Beirut are true partners in combating terrorism worldwide. This is on the heels of the Czech Republic recently releasing, after refusing an extradition request by the U.S., 2 members of Hezbollah wanted in America on charges of planning to murder U.S. government officials and drugs and arms trafficking. At least one of these individuals is known to have had close ties to a notorious Russian arms dealer and is Russia's link to Hezbollah. So I'm interested in hearing the administration's assessment of the relationship between Iran and Lebanon, and more specifically Hezbollah and the LAF, as well as Lebanon's relations with its Arab neighbors, the nexus between Russia, Hezbollah, and the LAF, as well as the prospects for Lebanon's future stability. I'd also like to hear how the administration's policy toward Lebanon fits in the larger picture with the fight against ISIS and the conflict in Syria, the Syrian humanitarian crisis, and how we plan on ensuring that the spillover from Lebanon does not threaten our friend and ally, the democratic Jewish state of Israel. And with that, I'm pleased to yield to the ranking member, my friend Ted Deutsch.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thanks for calling this hearing. Thanks for our witnesses for appearing today. Welcome back, Ambassador Firestein. We're delighted to see you again before you retire, and I'm sure there's no place you'd rather be to celebrate your birthday than appearing before our committee. So, happy birthday to you, and Dr. Exum, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the committee as well. You're welcome to celebrate your birthdays here. It's a standing offer we make. We tend to look at Lebanon in pieces in the context of other regional actors and conflicts, but today is going to give us the opportunity to look at the range of challenges facing Lebanon and how U.S. policy can best address those challenges. Lebanon's been locked in a political stalemate that has all but frozen the country's ability to effectively govern its diverse population. The parliament's been unable to agree on consensus president since 2014, struggled to face down its #1 internal threat, Hezbollah, while outside pressures from the Syrian conflict continue to mount. Divisions within Lebanese society have long made it susceptible to outside influence. The ouster of the Syrian military 11 years ago, yesterday, unfortunately did not free the country from those looking to exploit it. Iran has only sought to strengthen Hezbollah's grip on Lebanon, moving weapons and money to the group to carry out its attacks on Israel and other targets worldwide. Iran turned Hezbollah into its own proxy terrorist organization. This culminated in the deployment of somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 Hezbollah fighters into Syria to fight alongside Assad's troops as Iran was desperate to save its Syrian lifeline to Hezbollah. Conflict in Syria has devastated Lebanon's economy. Nearly a quarter of the population is now refugees. This has only intensified the economic turmoil already plaguing Lebanon and drawn deeper divisions between Sunnis and Shiites. Hezbollah's power grip on Lebanon towns in the south remains tight as the group provides everything from protection to paychecks to basic social services. Hezbollah, in effect, functions as a state within a state. And despite the government's desire to remain neutral in the Syrian conflict, it has unfortunately been unable to avoid attacks from Hezbollah's continued involvement on the ground. Bombings in Beirut in November 2015 by alleged ISIS recruiters unfortunately killed 43. U.S. policy toward Lebanon has long sought to counter Hezbollah by focusing on building up the capabilities of the Lebanese armed forces to act as the sole legitimate guarantor of security in the country. But despite gains made in counterterrorism and border control, gaps exist in the LAF's ability to control the security of its country. Particularly concerning is the LAF's ability to control the flow of weapons in and out of its territory. In recent years, the U.S. has consistently increased assistance and cooperation to the LAF to counter both the threats emanating from Syria and Hezbollah. But Dr. Exum, I look to you today to provide us with an update, with an updated assessment of LAF's capabilities. Further, how significant will the effect be of the withdrawal of $4 billion in aid from Saudi Arabia to the LAF? And can we count on other like-minded partners who have an interest in seeing Lebanon succeed fill that gap? Of great concern to many of us in Congress is the enforcement of UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which, by all accounts, has been a dismal failure. With no one to enforce the resolution, Hezbollah has rebuilt its arsenal of rockets and now possesses over 100,000 capable of reaching every corner of Israel. Fear over the transfer of advanced weaponry from Assad's stockpiles to Hezbollah has prompted numerous strikes on weapons convoys by Israel. And with the prospect of additional weapons coming from Iran and Hezbollah, it's now more important than ever that Israel's qualitative military edge be strengthened. And as talks over the new Memorandum of Understanding continue with Israel, every consideration must be given to the strength of Hezbollah's arsenal. And as Lebanon grapples with its tenuous security situation, its state institutions, unfortunately, grow weaker. Deputy Secretary Blinken said on his most recent visit to Lebanon, unless and until a president is chosen, he said, the erosion of Lebanon's political institutions will only deepen. To that end, the United States must continue to support Lebanon's legitimate state institutions and work with elements in the government to help prevent an economic crisis. I'm pleased to see the Lebanese banking sector working with the United States to implement the provisions of the Hezbollah International Financing Protection Act, which will help wall off Lebanese banks from Hezbollah's illicit activities. If we want to see success and stability for the people of Lebanon, we must focus attention on those communities hosting an extraordinary number of refugees. With no UN-run refugee camps in the country, many Syrians have sought shelter in parking garages and abandoned buildings. And the international community must provide Lebanon with the resources needed to expand access to education and health care for the hundreds of thousands of Syrian children there. And as I have mentioned many times in this subcommittee, I applaud the humanitarian efforts of the United States, and I implore the Department, Ambassador Firestein, to remind our allies and friends around the world that they must meet this crisis head-on. Contributing to the humanitarian crisis also contributes to security. Madam Chairman, like all of us, the people of Lebanon deserve to live in peace and security, free from the grips of terrorism. Lebanon is a tinderbox, and U.S. policy must focus on continuing to prevent it from sparking. Again, I thank the witnesses for appearing today and look forward to a productive discussion.
Thank you so much, Congressman Deutsch. And now I would like to recognize members for their opening statements, and we will begin with Mr. Shabbat of Ohio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as far as I'm concerned, Lebanon is one of the key countries, one of the most important countries in the Middle East. Regional powers have a long history of fighting for influence in Lebanon, and unfortunately, it continues to be the subject of coercive forces outside its borders. I'm deeply concerned that the tensions between Iran and Saudi Arabia may further exacerbate the looming instability in Lebanon. This is particularly troubling considering the Lebanese economy is facing serious strains caused by, among other things, hosting over 1 million Syrian refugees, which now makes up about a quarter of the population in Lebanon. And while Lebanon has made some positive democratic shifts over the years, the fact remains there are still armed non-state groups in Lebanon, and this is reason enough to pay special attention to the situation there. A long-term breakdown in leadership and governance in Lebanon would leave it susceptible to the same chaos that we've seen elsewhere in the region, and that absolutely must not happen. Finally, not only is Hezbollah hostile towards our traditional ally, Israel, but we are now hearing some argue that Hezbollah's political participation in the Lebanese government is resulting in an even greater straining of tensions between Lebanon and the other Arab nations. And further breakdowns in diplomatic relations in the region could have a significant negative impact. So we appreciate the witnesses and look forward to hearing them today, and yield back the balance.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shabbat. Mr. Cicilline of Rhode Island.
Thank you, Chairman Ros-Lehtinen and Ranking Member Deutsch, for calling this hearing on U.S. policy toward Lebanon, and thank you to our witnesses. I look forward to hearing from you about the geostrategic importance of Lebanon, particularly in the context of the ongoing Syrian conflict and its related refugee crisis, the undue influence of Hezbollah, and the threat of ISIL and other terrorist groups in the region and beyond. Given sustained U.S. interest and support to Lebanon over the years, our strategic objective of supporting a viable, independent, sovereign, and democratic Lebanon that is at peace with its neighbors is more important than ever. It's imperative that we continue to support these goals, and I want to assure that U.S. resources are applied in the best and most effective way possible. We cannot afford to let Lebanon slide into further disarray, and Lebanon must help itself by providing good governance and security for its people. I look forward to the witnesses' testimony today and to working with the administration and my colleagues to further strengthen our important relationship with Lebanon. And I thank you, Madam Chair, and yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Cicilline. And Mr. Meadows of North Carolina.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for your vision and your undying, unyielding effort to make sure that we address this issue.
Gentlemen can have 2 more minutes.
I want to thank the witnesses for being here. For me, this is one that is not only a complex question, but certainly one that we need to show resolve and make sure that those that are our friends, and by that, the Lebanese people, that they understand clearly what we stand for and what we won't stand for. And by that, addressing Hezbollah in a meaningful way through the tools that have been given the Department of Treasury and other areas, we need to make sure that we do that. I think there are times that we are ambiguous about that. And having a communications director who is part Lebanese, having someone who cuts my hair every 4 weeks who is full Lebanese, I can assure you I'm going to follow up on it. With that, I'll yield back, Madam Chairman.
Thank you so much. More information that we cared to have. But,
Madam,
now I'll turn to another sharing kind of guy, Mr. Connolly of
Madam-
Virginia.
Madam Chair, if you could just hold the time, I just want to remind you, I gave you chocolate.
He did, and dark chocolate, the best.
And, Dr. and
Mr.
secondly,
Connolly's recognized for
secondly,
as
I
every
didn't
time
realize
you
Dr.
may
Exum
consume.
gives haircuts. So, at any rate, thank you, Madam Chairman. I first went to Lebanon with my friend who's in the room, it was a really revealing kind of trip that Graham exposed to me. And I just got to say, we can talk about Hezbollah as if it somehow was created sui generis within Lebanon, who knows how or why. But the dysfunction within Lebanon is what created Hezbollah, created a receptive climate for Hezbollah. You know, I'm a local government kind of guy. When you can't even pick up the trash for 8 months, it leads to mass riots. It leads to mass disaffection with the government. And I think that, plus the government, the legislative paralysis, the inability to elect a president and so forth, I think it's persuaded most Lebanese that it's terminally dysfunctional as a country. And that ought to concern us, as well as the fact that we got 1.1 million refugees, the equivalent of 25% of the population. I think that would be like 70 million here in the United States, comparable. So those two things are destabilizing in the extreme, and I think we cannot afford to ignore them. Thank you.
Mr. Connolly. And seeing no further requests for time, I'm pleased to introduce our excellent panel of experts. First, our pleasure to welcome back Ambassador Gerald Firestein, who is the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs. Previously, he served as our ambassador to Yemen, yikes, from 2010 to 2013, has served in several different postings throughout the world, including Deputy Chief of Mission in Islamabad, another yikes, and Deputy Consul General in Jerusalem, yeah. Thank you for your service. We look forward to your testimony. And as Mr. Deutsch had pointed out, for those members who were not here, this is 2 special banner days for Ambassador Firestein. Number 1, it's his birthday. And as Ted pointed out, he can think of no funner way of him to celebrate his birthday than to appear before a congressional panel. And number 2, it is his last testimony in his position because he's going to retire in 4 weeks. So we wish you nothing but the best, Ambassador. And next we welcome for the first time Dr. Andrew Exum, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Middle East Policy. He is the Principal Advisor to the Secretary of Defense and Undersecretary of Defense for Policy on International Security Strategy and Policy for the Middle East. In addition to his current service with the Defense Department, Dr. Exum has served our nation with distinction in both Afghanistan and Iraq as an officer in the U.S. Army. We thank you for your service there as well. And what is that lapel pin of service?
This would be the combat scroll of the 1st Ranger Battalion.
Not bad. All right, thank you. We welcome both of you. And Mr. Ambassador, we will begin with you, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman and Ranking Member Deutsch. And before I say anything else, let me just say, if this is indeed the last time that I come up here, at least in this capacity, I want to thank all of you, all of the members of the committee for the many opportunities that we've had, as well as with your staff to come up and discuss these issues, and to say that I've always found my experiences here to be rewarding and enjoyable even. So thank you. And thank you for inviting me to discuss U.S. policy towards Lebanon today. I'd like to request that my full opening
Without
statement be
objections.
submitted to the record. Promoting a Lebanon that is independent, sovereign, stable, prosperous, and religiously diverse is crucial to advancing a range of U.S. interests in the Middle East. Lebanon today faces 3 critical challenges. First are the spillover effects of the ongoing Syrian conflict. Second are the activities of Hezbollah. And third is the political crisis that has nearly paralyzed government decision-making for nearly 2 years. We're grateful to the Congress for passing the Hezbollah International Financing Prevention Act, signed into law last December. This law provides us with critical new tools to dismantle Hezbollah's global financial network. Our strategy for helping Lebanon address these 3 challenges is simple: to ensure that the Lebanese security forces have the tools that they need to prevent ISIL from destabilizing the country while helping build legitimate state institutions in order to deny Hezbollah what it seeks to avoid: a strong central government capable of providing services for the entire country. The conflict in Syria has severely tested Lebanon's resilience. Our assistance to refugees from Syria and to the Lebanese communities that have graciously hosted them for nearly 5 years has helped alleviate the economic burden on the Lebanese people. Lebanon faces a real threat from ISIL and the Nusra Front. This is why we support Lebanon's legitimate state security institutions, in particular the Lebanese Armed Forces, and see that as a down payment on a long-term investment in regional stability. Just today, an LAF raid in the town of Arsal in Lebanon resulted in the death of a key ISIL operative. My Pentagon colleague, Das Exum, will discuss our relationship with Lebanon security institutions in greater depth. Our cooperation is not limited to counterterrorism. Combating trafficking in persons is one of our highest priorities. Lebanon has made important gains in targeting human traffickers, the slave traders of today. In late March, the Internal Security Forces raided a human trafficking ring, arresting 16 traffickers and rescuing 75 victims. On the second challenge that threatens Lebanon, and one I know that this committee tracks closely, Hezbollah. When Hezbollah first intervened in the Syrian civil war to prop up the Assad regime, the group showed its true colors to anyone who still doubted that Hezbollah put its own interests and those of its foreign backers ahead of those of the Lebanese people. When Hezbollah conducts terrorist activities abroad or drags Lebanon into the war in neighboring Syria, it's ordinary Lebanese people who are paying the price. The U.S. government is actively implementing the Hezbollah International Financing Prevention Act. The Department of Treasury's Office of Foreign Asset Control issued new HIFPA regulations on April 15th. We will use our full authority under HIFPA to target foreign financial institutions that knowingly facilitate significant transactions or engage in money laundering activities or other activities related to Hezbollah. When we have evidence, we will build a case and we will take action. Before the passage of HIFPA, we were already targeting the nodes of Hezbollah's international financing by designating over 100 Hezbollah-affiliated individuals and entities. The third major challenge Lebanon faces is restoring effective government. We commend Prime Minister Tamam Salam for his courage and perseverance in addressing Lebanon's most pressing challenges, but he cannot do the job alone. Next month will mark 2 years the Lebanese people have been without a president. Lebanon's leaders, particularly those who are blocking a quorum from convening in parliament, must put the interests of the Lebanese people first by electing a president and restoring a fully functioning government. Madam Chairman, in these and many other ways, we are contributing to the stability, independence, and security of Lebanon, which is as much a U.S. interest as it is a Lebanese one. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before the subcommittee. I welcome the opportunity to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Dr. Exum.
Madam Chairman, Ranking Member Deutsch, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to discuss U.S. policy towards Lebanon. I've taken note of the questions that the various members asked in their opening statements, and I've also made a note for my staff about the dark chocolate. I'll be better prepared for the next subcommittee appearance. Ambassador Firestein highlighted the array of interlocking challenges that Lebanon confronts and gave an overview of our comprehensive strategy in Lebanon. My own experience in Lebanon is personal as well as professional. I lived in Lebanon for 2 years while attending the American University of Beirut, of which I'm a proud graduate, and I returned to Lebanon for another 8 months in 2008 to conduct research for my doctoral dissertation. If you'd told me 5 years ago that Lebanon would be flooded with over 1 million refugees from a brutal sectarian civil war in Syria, but would somehow remain an oasis of relative calm in the Middle East, I would not have believed you. I would have explained, probably with some academic condescension, that I was an expert on Lebanon and that what you were describing to me was impossible, given Lebanon's own difficult history of sectarian conflict. Yet I would have been wrong, so much for all that grad school. I would have undervalued the drivers of stability in Lebanon, choosing to focus on the more obvious drivers of instability, and I would have, most importantly, underestimated the role the Lebanese armed forces has played in keeping Lebanon cohesive and at peace with its neighbors and itself. I'll focus my comments on our military cooperation with the LAF, which is the core pillar of our policy in Lebanon, and something that we can all, from our taxpayers to our special operations soldiers to our policymakers, be proud of. Amidst all the challenges that Lebanon confronts, the LAF remains the country's only highly functioning national institution. Our support has enabled the LAF to beat back the advances of the Islamic State and other extremist groups such as the Nusra Front, although not without some high degree of sacrifice from our Lebanese partners. Strengthening the LAF also advances a range of U.S. interests in the Middle East that includes not only countering the spread of ISIL and other violent extremists, but also stemming the influence of Iran and Hezbollah in the region. Since 2006, the United States has provided Lebanon more than $1.2 billion in military assistance that aims to build a LAF that, 1, is capable of maintaining internal stability and security, 2, is capable of securing Lebanon's borders and preventing ISIL and other foreign extremists from destabilizing the country, and 3, is the preeminent military force in Lebanon, undermining the claims of Hezbollah and other militias for maintaining their arms, as well as the claim of Hezbollah to be acting in the defense of Lebanon's interests. In October, the President announced that the United States would intensify its security assistance to Lebanon as part of the campaign to counter ISIL. To execute the President's guidance, Lebanon will likely continue to be one of the Department of Defense's priority countries for our counterterrorism partnership funding in fiscal year 2016 to continue to bolster the LAF capability to encounter ISIL and other extremists. This week, I had the opportunity to meet with a delegation of senior general officers from the LAF during the DoD's annual U.S.-Lebanon Joint Staff Talks. Some of these general officers I've known for years, dating back to when I served as the desk officer for Lebanon at DoD, and they're among our closest partners in the region. But don't take my word for it. Ask any one of the hundreds of special operators who have served in Lebanon over the past 5 years. They will tell you the Lebanese are among the best partners we have in the region to work with. They train hard and they fight hard. We couldn't ask for more in a partner. The LAF has taken a variety of bold measures to maintain stability in Lebanon and counter the destabilizing effects of the Syrian conflict. The LAF has increased its operational tempo and reinforced Lebanon's borders with additional border and special operations forces. These forces have been highly active, engaging militants on a weekly basis by launching artillery and airstrikes, by executing clearing operations in extremist-associated neighborhoods, and conducting raids and arrests. High-profile arrests by the LAF and other security services include the apprehension of radical Salafist cleric Ahmed al-Asir, ISIL operative Omar Makati, and the 1996 Khobar Towers bombing suspect Ahmed al-Muqasil. The effectiveness of U.S. assistance and the LAF's willingness to exercise its role as the sole legitimate defense force in Lebanon was further underscored in March when the LAF executed the daring operation in Ras Baalbek that killed over a dozen ISIL fighters and destroyed ISIL vehicles, a command post, and a safe house. And as Ambassador Firestein noted just today, an ISIL operative was killed in Arsal. The Emir Abu Fuz was killed by Lebanese Special Operations Forces just today. In the face of these rising challenges, the LAF has demonstrated considerable unity, fortitude, and professionalism. The LAF has organized itself effectively to maintain a tremendously high operational tempo for many of its units and has demonstrated the ability to make appropriate requests for and use of the equipment we've given it, as well as the unity and professionalism in numerous operations. Although the LAF has prevented ISIL from destabilizing the country to date, the stakes for LAF's failure are extremely high. If the LAF falters in its fight against extremists, Hezbollah, or even long demilitarized Christian militias could decide to seek or take direct military actions to protect their communities, resulting in an outbreak of sectarian fighting that could undermine the stability of Lebanon. A LAF defeat, combined with a Hezbollah victory over extremist forces, risks strengthening Hezbollah and Iran inside of Lebanon, and therefore undermining U.S. policy efforts to bolster Lebanese state institutions' ability to exert sovereign authority throughout Lebanon. As the United States faces a strategic environment in the Middle East that is the most unstable it's been in 40 years, our positive relationship with and continued support to Lebanon and the LAF are more important than ever. The LAF remains a critical pillar of Lebanon's stability, and its commitment to curtailing sectarian fighting and terrorism has been a significant factor in preventing Lebanon from descending into greater violence and instability. Madam Chairman and Representative Deutsch, I thank you and other distinguished members of the subcommittee for calling this hearing and drawing attention to Lebanon's security challenges and the U.S. security interest in supporting Lebanon during this critical time. With that, I'm open to your questions.
Job well done. Thank you so much. In the interest of time, because we will have votes shortly, I'd like to give my time to Congressman Shabbat of Ohio.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Earlier this week, we heard that Hassan Nasrallah and a handful of senior members of Hezbollah met with both Iran's vice president and Iran's ambassador to Lebanon. How concerned is the administration over Iran's influence in Lebanon and Lebanon? I have a very important part of my district. It has the same name, and it's Lebanon. Lebanon. We love you both. So how concerned is the administration about the Iranian influence and what efforts are being made to counter Iran's influence there?
Thank you, Mr. Shabbat. I would say, of course, we're extremely concerned for a variety of reasons, and most specifically currently is that the extent to which Iran is encouraging and pressing Hezbollah to interfere in the election of a new president and effectively to paralyze the government of Lebanon. And so this has been an issue and a concern for us for, in fact, many years, that Iran has supported Hezbollah to the detriment, in our view, of the overall security and stability of the country. In order to address it, of course, we have been extremely heavily engaged in the variety of activities that we've laid out. So everything from trying to help counter Iranian influence and ensure that there is an election and ensure that the government of Lebanon can function and can perform its duties and provide services to its people. The support that we're providing to the LAF and the internal security forces in order to allow the security forces to maintain control over Lebanon's borders as well as the sovereignty of its territory. All of these are factors in pushing back against Iranian exploitation of the vulnerabilities in that society. And of course, the other part is what we're trying to do in order to build a broad international coalition of support for all of the activities that we're talking about, whether it's refugees, humanitarian relief, or these other political and economic areas that we're working in. All of them will limit Iran's influence in Lebanon.
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador, according to the Hezbollah International Financing Prevention Act of 2015, the President is due to provide Congress with a number of reports, including reports on countries that support Hezbollah, an assessment of whether a country's government is taking adequate measures to disrupt Hezbollah's networks and activities within that country, and methods that Hezbollah utilizes to raise or transfer funds. As of today, I don't believe we've received those reports. Can you please update us on what the status of those reports are and when we could expect to receive them?
Yes, Mr. Shabbat, I'm pleased to say that the State Department and Treasury Department did submit the required reports to Congress several weeks ago. The other reports are in the hands of ODNI, and we'll be happy to go back and seek from them some further information about when they might be prepared to submit those reports.
All right, thank you. Dr. Exum, let me go to you. We always, as I know you're well aware, I've met with the Lebanese Armed Force generals over the years, and they're always making obvious requests for funding and the support they need and that sort of thing, and I'm inclined to support them. That being said, I think a lot of my colleagues in Congress are always concerned that some of those dollars don't end up in the hands of Hezbollah in some manner. Would you, once again, and I know you mentioned before, you know, the good things that the LAF has been doing, but could you make us more, tell me why I can be satisfied that that money isn't going where it shouldn't be going?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to answer this question, Congressman. I feel very proud to announce that the Lebanese Armed Forces, as you know, when we provide weapons, especially when they're sensitive weapons like night vision goggles and things like that, we have end-use monitoring requirements. And the Lebanese Armed Forces have consistently had the best end-use monitoring reporting of any military that we work with, meaning that the equipment that we provide to the Lebanese Armed Forces, we can account for it at any given time. We have a pretty large, OMC in the embassy in Lebanon, as well as a forward presence there, and so we feel pretty confident that we feel highly confident, given their end-use monitoring rate, that we can account for the equipment, Congressman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Deutsch?
Thanks, Madam Chairman. I'd like to talk about the end of the Syrian conflict, though in light of the news reports just today, it's impossible right now to imagine. But we spend a lot of time talking about what role, if any, Assad will play. But I'd like you both to focus on what results might lead to a weakening of Hezbollah that would, in turn, potentially lead to a strengthening of the government in Lebanon.
Thank you, Mr. Deutsch. Of course, in terms, of course, all of this is highly speculative because we can't really see the shape of an outcome that would bring peace to Syria. But if we were able to achieve that, in a way that provided for a political transition that brought in all of the elements of Syrian society, that gave the Sunnis and the other minority groups inside of Syria full voice, that we believe that in and of itself would weaken Hezbollah and certainly weaken the linkages between Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah and Lebanon. And so the kind of discussions, negotiations that are going on now to fulfill the commitments that were made at Geneva I to allow for a political transition would be, in fact, the end game, the end state that we believe would achieve our broader regional objectives.
Thanks. Dr. Exum, do you have thoughts on that?
Congressman, I think I'd approach this a couple different ways. First off, you raised the interesting question about how this conflict in Syria has affected Hezbollah. in a different format and perhaps in a closed hearing of this subcommittee, we could talk about the effect that the conflict in Syria has had on Hezbollah for both positive and negative ways. I think that what this conflict has done in the positive way, it has allowed the Lebanese armed forces to prove itself to the population, and has certainly allowed the Lebanese armed forces to prove that it can defend Lebanon and that there is less of a need for these other armed groups. If you remember, Hezbollah was allowed to keep its arms under the Ta'if Accords that ended the Lebanese civil war, but that was based on a threat against Israel. I think that the Lebanese armed forces has been able to show that it's been quite effective in terms of fighting these non-state actors, and it's given us more time to build up these forces. I think the question I have, Congressman, and I'll speak quite bluntly, is what happens when Hezbollah comes home? How do they see their role in Lebanon? Do they want to turn their attentions towards the instability or towards conflict with Israel? My biggest fear for all that we've accomplished in Lebanon is that Hezbollah drags Lebanon and Israel into another war that's not in the interests of the Lebanese people, the Israeli people, or certainly the United States either.
And just continuing that thought, what are the practical implications of the LAF without Saudi funding? And is it going to be made up elsewhere? What does it mean?
No, and thanks for raising that, because I was just in the Gulf with Secretary Carter last week. Yep. He met with all the Gulf defense ministers, also had the opportunity to meet bilaterally with Mohammed bin Salman and Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Zayed. I think there are two levels that this affects us. There's the pragmatic kind of immediate acquisitions level. This means that the Lebanese armed forces likely won't be able to acquire some of the weapon systems that we feel are necessary for them to be more effective against groups like Daesh and Nusra. These include close air support platforms as well as kind of protected mobility, so advanced, armored personnel carriers. Mm-hmm. That's the practical aspect. The political aspect, and this is something that Secretary Carter this is something that our department has certainly, I don't want to speak for him, but certainly our department has advanced, is that, in places like Baghdad and places like Beirut, we need our Gulf partners to be on the ground with us. We need them to be engaged, because when they're not engaged, it cedes the ground to Iran. So I think I worry that with the withdrawal, the apparent withdrawal of Saudi Arabia from Lebanon, I hope this is just a monetary thing. Because quite frankly, we need our Gulf partners to be there. Otherwise, I fear that it only increases Iranian influence in Beirut, just as the absence of Gulf engagement in Baghdad increases Iranian influence there.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Exum, and Ambassador Farsini. I just want to also add my best wishes for a peaceful and enjoyable retirement. And thank you for your service.
Not in Yemen, not in Islamabad, but Jerusalem. Maybe? Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ambassador, let me add my word of congratulations too, but I must caution you that they say that retirements are not all that it's cracked up to be. The hours are long and the pay is low. So congratulations to you. Dr. Exum, you said that the withdrawal of other, in regard to Congressman Deutsch's question about the withdrawal of the Saudis, you said that we needed our other Gulf partners, such as who?
Such as the United Arab Emirates in particular. On the one hand, we applaud the GCC countries for their strong stand against Hezbollah. It's in line with ours. The designation of Hezbollah as a foreign terrorist organization, that's directly in line with us. However, as we've just laid out, our strategy for Lebanon, our policy is based around strengthening Lebanese national institutions, and we need the Saudis, we need the Emiratis and the Kuwaitis to be with us in those efforts.
Is there any indication that the Emiratis, well, the Saudis obviously already, but the Kuwaitis and others, are they going to withdraw their support?
Mr. Weber, if I may, let me just say, first of all, let me just say that we understand and appreciate the concerns that the Saudis had that led them to make this decision. That the government of Lebanon, unlike nearly every other country in the international community, including our own, was unwilling to condemn a purposeless attack on Saudi diplomatic facilities in Iran. So we don't want to suggest that we disagree or that we don't appreciate the rationale behind the Saudi position. Having said that, we agree entirely with the view, the perception that Dr. Exum outlined, and that is that we all need to be working together in order to support Lebanese institutions, including most specifically the LAF, in order to stabilize the country and provide security. When Secretary Kerry was in Hafr al-Batn a few weeks ago, he did have conversations also with the Saudis and urged them to limit the extent of their actions against the government of Lebanon, and to look for ways to move back into a position where they would be more solidly supportive and be more consistent with the approach that we've taken. And I believe that we've heard from the Saudi leadership that they're prepared to do that.
Well, there's three really interesting things here in my, well, more than three, but three that I'll ask about. In our notes here, one of the comments it says is that most of the Syrian refugees are housed actually in Lebanese neighborhoods. How do they do that?
This is actually true throughout the region. It's true in Jordan and in Turkey as well, and that is that most of the Syrians, when they came across, were able to find apartments. Many of them, of course, have relatives who live in Lebanon, and they were able to simply move in with their relatives. Others, many of the refugees, when they first came across, had savings and other kinds
that makes sense.
Financial ability.
And then Dr. Exum, you said, you know, was it a year ago, 3 years ago maybe, I forget your timing, that if someone had said this would be happening in Lebanon, you'd puff up your academic chest, as it were, and say no way. And our notes say that there are drivers of stability. What are those drivers of stability, in your opinion?
So, Congressman, I think, like I said, first and foremost, the Lebanese armed forces. I'm very
But
proud.
let me give you my third question then, because it ties in with this one, Doctor. Pardon the interruption, but
No.
One of our notes says that we had a witness in HFAC, March of 2016, I think it was, who actually said that there's so many Hezbollah now in LAF that LAF has become an extension of the Hezbollah movement. I don't know if you're aware of that. Would you agree with that?
I would not agree with that assessment. I think that the relationship between the Lebanese armed forces and Hezbollah is one that obviously we carefully study. I believe Madam Chairman described it as a partnership or synergy. I think we'd describe it as deconfliction. If there was ever a partnership or even cooperation between the two organizations, that would be highly problematic, of course, for this department, especially since we have U.S. personnel who are working with the Lebanese armed forces.
So you said that the Lebanese armed forces are the #1 stabilizing influence in Lebanon.
I think that would be the first among several drivers of stability. Others, Congressman, is bear in mind that, for better or for worse, much of Lebanon's political class lived through and were leaders during the Lebanese Civil War. So they remember what the abyss looks like. And I think at times when we've seen sectarian tensions almost spiral out of control, there's been a conscious step back. And I think that that has to do with, unfortunately, the difficult memories of Lebanon's own civil war.
I got you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cicilline.
Thank you very much. Thank you again for your testimony. I'm particularly interested to know whether the Arab League's recent designation of Hezbollah as a terrorist group is impacting Hezbollah's ability to operate in the region, and as a follow-on, considering Hezbollah's exacerbation of the humanitarian crisis and the significant loss of life, is there any sense that you have that there's growing support within the European community to fully designate Hezbollah as a terrorist organization?
Mr. Cicilline, in regard to your first question, we do believe that the designation by the GCC and by the Arab League of Hezbollah as a terrorist organization is an important step in the right direction. And we are moving to try to help build practical steps on the basis of that designation to increase the cooperation that we have. So, for example, Department of State, Treasury, and Justice recently held a law enforcement coordination group meeting in Bahrain to try to increase the way that we can work together to limit Hezbollah's capacity to operate in the region. We think that this is an important step, and we'll continue to move forward on that. As for the Europeans, we believe that the level of cooperation that we're getting from Europe is very good. That, in fact, the designation by the EU of the military wing of Hezbollah in 2013 was an important step in the right direction. We're working with Europol and with others, again, in very close coordination to try to address the Hezbollah threat as it applies globally.
And do the Gulf countries have the capabilities to enforce this designation and the willingness?
We believe that GCC capabilities have grown over time. We're working with them as part of the President's Camp David summit with GCC leaders last year. We agreed that we're going to increase our cooperation and coordination with them on issues like terror finance, specifically applying to Hezbollah. And to look at other areas where we could increase our cooperation. So the trend line is positive. Their capabilities are growing, and we'll continue to work with them very closely to try to increase that.
Thank you, Ambassador. I, too, wish you well on your retirement, and thank you for your extraordinary service to our country. Dr. Aksam, you mentioned the apparent withdrawal of Saudi Arabia from its military assistance to Lebanon. So I'm first interested to know why you use the word apparent and whether or not it's more than it appears to us. And also, the United States, obviously the UK, the European Union, and France have reaffirmed and in many cases increased their defense cooperation with Lebanon. At the same time, Iran has also offered to fill in the funding gap. And my question is really, how has the Lebanese government responded to this? What do you think the long-term sort of effect of that is? And if you could just discuss kind of the apparent withdrawal.
Right. Congressman, first off, the donation itself was always somewhat ambiguous. It had been announced quite some time ago, and maybe Mr. Ambassador could announce that. Exactly, the Saudi, right.
You know, of course, we had been working very closely with the Saudis, and they were cooperating with us on the purchase of some U.S. articles, also with the French on the purchase of French articles. That financing has been withdrawn, but we certainly do hope that the Saudis over time will restore much of that and will be able to continue.
And while we were in the discussions about that, for that donation, it was ambiguous as far as where we stood in terms of that money actually landing in a bank account where it could be used. So now that the announcement has been made, we hope to continue to engage with our Saudi partners to reinvest in the Lebanese armed forces. With respect to any potential Iranian investment, I would defer to my State Department colleagues, but I will say that our British colleagues have been quite good partners, especially with Lebanon's border security program, and we've partnered quite closely in terms of the border and regiments that we have trained, in terms of the checkpoints that we have created along Lebanon's border with Syria, and in terms of the individual fighting positions that we've constructed. So the British have been tremendous partners for us in Lebanon.
Right, and as for the Iranian offer, I think that the government of Lebanon saw it for exactly what it was, which was a propaganda play, and they said that they had no interest.
Great. Thank you so much. I yield back, Madam Chairman.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Cicilline. Dr. Yoho.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Gentlemen, I appreciate you being here. What is the current assessment of rockets and missiles in Lebanon, Dr. Exum?
Are you referring to Hezbollah's arsenal?
Yes.
I think I could say that in this hearing that they have reconstituted, at the very least, their rocket arsenal from 2006. I think to go into greater detail, I'd be happy to arrange for a briefing from one of our intelligence.
Yeah, I'd like to get that because I have here in my notes that it says the Israelis' current assessment is 150,000 missiles and rockets. I would be curious to see where we are from there. And then we've also heard with the Iran nuclear deal that Iran has said they're going to help retrofit these with smart bomb technology. Do we have any indication that that's going on?
Again, I'll refer those,
Okay.
those specific questions to our intelligence community. Let me just say, though, Congressman, that as you know, we have partnered with the Israelis. I think over the past 5 years, the Department of Defense has spent an average of $500 million over the past 5 years alone, an average annually of $500 million to partner with the Israelis on their missile defense technology. And we've had several key successes, both with the development of the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 systems, the David Sling system. These are for more long-range ballistic missiles. But most importantly, the Iron Dome program that the United States has co-developed with Israel has saved countless Israeli lives. This has all been since 2006. So
And that's
we
great.
take this threat very seriously, Congressman.
Well, and let me ask both of you, with the, again, trying to assess the aftermath of the Iran nuclear deal, do you see Iran inserting and influencing that region more, getting more hegemony in that area and taking, just more leadership in that area? Are we seeing that more since the Iran nuclear deal, or since some of the sanctions have been released or money been released?
Mr. Yoho, this is, of course, something that we watch very carefully and was a subject of most of the conversation that the President had with the GCC leadership when he was in Riyadh just 2 weeks ago. We do believe that in the period since the JCPOA was signed, that the government of Iran has tried to expand its influence, its presence in the region, that they're going to continue to try to at least portray an image of an Iran that is becoming more and more active, more and more powerful in the region. Some of this is, of course, overstated and is designed really to create a certain image of Iran, perhaps more than is real. But there is also elements of it that are well worth watching, and therefore the strategy that we're pursuing, which is to build up the capabilities of our allies and partners in the region, the GCC, government of Israel, to confront these Iranian efforts. Also, as Dr. Exum said, whether you're looking at Baghdad or at Beirut or at Sana'a, to increase the ability of those societies to resist Iranian expansion, to resist Iranian exploitation of vulnerabilities, to work with our Gulf allies to do that.
And that's the important thing that we want to do, is make sure that the unintended consequences doesn't embolden Iran. That has a more of a destabilizing effect, if that's possible in that region.
Absolutely.
That we want to make sure that if they are having an influence, it's a positive influence, which time will tell on that. As far as Russia's involvement in Syria, along the Israeli border with Syria, are we seeing any influence with Russia's presence there as far as a stabilizing in that area? Or have you assessed anything? Is it a positive effect or negative, or no change at all?
In terms of the Israeli-Syrian border?
Yes.
Well, I think that if you look at the evidence that there's a dialogue going on between the Israelis and the Russians in order to try to deconflict, and of course the government of Israel has said that they had an understanding with the Russians that they would continue to carry out their defensive operations inside of Syria in order to ensure that the Iranians or others couldn't exploit the political chaos in the region. So that part has been positive. But overall, the Russian presence has not contributed to stability
Okay.
on the border.
I'm out
Thank
of
you so
time, and I
much,
thank
Dr.
you
Yoho.
for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Connolly?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Mr. Feinstein, I want to be real clear. You hold an appointment in this administration, and I want to make very clear what you did or did not say to Mr. Yoho on the record. Is there any evidence that because of JCPOA or related to it in some fashion, Iran has changed or expanded its activity with respect to Hezbollah in Lebanon specifically and in other places in the region because of the free up of funds?
No, sir, there is no direct evidence
Right.
linking the two.
Right. And in fact, the evidence is, despite all of this PR about the funds, almost all of those funds have been used, in fact, for domestic investment because they ran down their reserves, and they've got some serious reinvestment they need to make in order to pump up the oil production as well. Is that a fair statement?
This is absolutely the assessment that we make.
Thank you. Just want to clear that up for the record. You know, when my friend Graham Bannerman, who's here today, by the way, he worked for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Madam Chairman.
All the good people came.
You know, we're everywhere. We're everywhere still.
Congressman Deutsch, do you remember?
But we went to Lebanon well over 30 years ago, and, you know, there were problems about Lebanese stability then. And it only got worse in the 80s when we were there, right? Because the Civil War had ended, we thought that was the worst. But certainly U.S. suffered terrible losses, and by the way, Democrats didn't exploit those problems of Ronald Reagan. So the embassy got blown up not once but twice. The MAU, the Marine Amphibious Unit at the Beirut airport, was blown up by terrorists, and we lost 240 young men. 240. 241, thank you. Graham and I lost a friend, Bill McIntyre, in the first bombing of the embassy. He worked for AID at that time. And you know, we had a series of assassinations of Lebanese leaders, most of it attributed to Syrian activity, because Syria wanted to keep control over Lebanon and certainly had, as I recall, troops in the Bekaa. But now when we look at Lebanon, and this is the question I want to ask you, are we looking now really at a fundamentally failed state? And can we ever find a formula to sort of put Humpty Dumpty back together again? I mean, and not necessarily with the status quo ante, but with something more democratic, more reflective of the demographics, the actual demographics, and a state that's going to function and work and provide services and security for its citizens, and to make sure it has secure borders with its neighbors like Israel. Go for it.
Mr. Connolly, we would absolutely not suggest that Lebanon is a failed state or anything close to being a failed state. As Dr. Exum said, there are drivers of stability there, that there is a resilience that has been demonstrated over these past years that in many ways is quite remarkable. The fact that, that Lebanon has been able to absorb over a third of its population in the form of refugees without creating huge social or political disintegration or dysfunction is a remarkable achievement on their part. The performance of the LAF and the internal security forces in holding the security together and addressing some fairly serious challenges, both externally from spillover from the Syrian conflict into Bekaa Valley, but also in terms of preventing the rise of extremism from within Syria and the performance within Lebanon, the performance of the ISF and the LAF, for example, in Tripoli, in maintaining stability there, even though there were extremist forces operating. So all of these things are very positive. There are challenges. There are serious challenges on the political front, the need to resolve this 2-year vacancy in the presidency and to allow the government to function. The challenge of his...
Most as bad as leaving a Supreme Court seat vacant for 9 months, but...
Yes, sir. All of these things are challenges, but I don't think that we have ever been at a point where we were not confident that the Lebanese would be able to pull this together and create a strong and stable society.
No, I would just concur with that. I think that that we have seen examples where we have been able to build up effective national institutions, and I would concur. I think you know, again, if, like I said at the beginning, if I were to go back 5 years and think that Lebanon would somehow be relatively stable, I would not have believed it. But I think Lebanon has proven a lot of us wrong over the past several years, given the resiliency of not only its people, but also the institutions it does have, either at the national or communal level.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. Mr. Higgins.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions. We have a vote, so the Lebanese Armed Forces, for both of you, is what percentage of that force is made up of the Shia population?
Yes, I have the precise demographics here. It's roughly it's about a third Christian, a third Sunni Muslim, and about a third Shia Muslim, with about 6% Druze population in there. I can go into greater detail if you'd like, sir.
Does the Lebanese Armed Forces, are they viewed as being more effective than Hezbollah as a fighting force?
They're not, I would say. I would think that the Lebanese Armed Forces are still a work in progress, and it's largely uneven. We've done some great work with the Lebanese Special Operations Forces. I think everybody, to include the Lebanese Armed Forces and our own military, believes that we've got a lot more work to do with the so-called conventional units within the Lebanese Armed Forces, the intervention brigades, the border regiment forces, and I think there's still a perception, which we're working to counter quite actively, that Hezbollah is a more effective actor on the battlefield.
Externally, with the Saudi pullback of $4 billion to support the Lebanese Armed Forces, is there a concern that internally in the country that the Lebanese Armed Forces loses its street cred, if you will, among the Shia population as the institution that is in place to protect all of Lebanon?
So in here, Congressman, I've taken off my DOD hat. I've got my analyst hat on now. And I've never really worried about the credibility of the Lebanese Armed Forces within the Shia population or within the Christian population. It's in large part the Sunni population that I've worried about, in part because so many of the operations that the Lebanese Armed Forces carry out are against Sunni extremists, and often they operate in largely Sunni communities like Ursad, like Tripoli in the north, like Sidon in the south. And I worry that there's a perception among some in Lebanon's Sunni community, which I believe has been increasingly radicalized in places due to the conflict in Syria and broader waves of sectarianism that have swept the region over the past 10 years. I worry about not their credibility, but the way they're perceived within that specific community. I will say overall, the Lebanese Armed Forces have never been more popular and never been more respected within Lebanon overall, and that's highly encouraging, Congressman.
Thank you. And Mr. Higgins,
sorry,
we
okay.
really do have 3 minutes to get to our vote, but thank you so much, and I'm sorry.
It's okay.
And with that, our subcommittee is adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you to the audience.